Hello and welcome to this Pentair Minutes to Proficient video. Today's topic, the wet end teardown of a Hypro ForceField pump. For today's demo, we will be tearing down the wet end of a Pentair Hypro 9310 series ForceField wet seal technology pump in our lab located in New Brighton, Minnesota. We hope you enjoy this video. The tools required to tear down the wet end of this pump include alcohol wipes, a dead blow hammer, a small socket or piece of PVC pipe, 2 flat screwdrivers. Additionally, this pump uses metric fasteners, so you'll need a 5mm Allen socket, a 13mm wrench, and a 17mm socket. Start by draining the fluid from the seal chamber. Next, use the 17mm socket to remove the 4 bolts from the casing. Remove the casing with the dead blow hammer. When you pry the casing out, be careful not to damage the O-ring groove. Next, remove the impeller nut. Use the 2 screwdrivers to pry off the impeller and remove the impeller key. Use the 5mm Allen socket to remove the bolts from the seal plate. It's a good idea to do this by hand to avoid stripping off the bolts. Lift the plate, being careful not to scratch the shaft. Remove the membrane. And the O-ring. Make sure to flush the seal chamber if it has been contaminated with chemicals. Use the 2 screwdrivers to remove the mechanical seal assembly. You've got to be careful not to scratch the shaft. The rear portion of the seal will come off after the motor is removed. Next, use the 13mm wrench to remove the motor mount and bolts. Once all 4 bolts are removed, turn the pump over, push on the flange, and this will release the other half of the seal. The stationary seal seat can be removed with a small socket or a piece of PVC pipe. Once removed, clean out any debris or residue that may be in the seal cavity. If necessary, use a wire brush to ensure that the sealing surface is clean. After cleaning the machined area, wipe it out with alcohol. At this point, if you're changing the mechanical seal only and not planning to repair the motor, polish out any scratches that may be along the shaft using a 300 to 600 grit emery cloth. Rotate the shaft while holding the sandpaper in a fixed position to avoid creating any new linear scratches along the shaft. Clean with alcohol after polishing. This completes the wet end teardown. Today's topic, the hydraulic motor teardown of a Hypro ForceField pump. The tools required will include a 2.5mm Allen wrench, a vise, a crescent wrench, a 6mm Allen wrench, a flathead screwdriver, an arbor press, an 1.25" pipe, at least 4 inches long, large external snap ring pliers, and some small snap ring pliers. To begin, use the 2.5mm Allen wrench to remove the set screws from the tone wheel. Carefully guide it over the shaft, making sure not to scratch it. Next, we'll put the motor in the vise, with the shaft facing down. Clamp the jaws directly onto the motor body, and not onto the shaft. Remove the port adapter. Loosen the jam nut and remove the bypass screw. Remove the 6mm Allen screws from the end plate. Carefully remove the end plate and the G-rotor housing. These may come off separately, and you may need to carefully tap off the G-rotor housing with a screwdriver. Remove both parts of the G-rotor. and its key. Inspect all surfaces for wear and replace if necessary. Now, we will move over to the arbor press. First, remove the large retaining ring. If you experience excessive resistance trying to remove this, use your 1/4 pipe to give it a light press to relieve the pressure. Now, let's flip it over, and we'll press up the shaft and bearing assembly. Supporting the bearing, press it onto the shaft with the threads facing up. Now you can remove the bearing, the spacer, the oil seal, the first thrust washer, the thrust bearing, and then the second thrust washer. A pro tip here, laying these parts out in order will help you remember which way they go back in during reassembly. Finish the disassembly by removing the small retaining ring from the shaft. Make sure to pull it to the back of the shaft to avoid damaging the sealing area. Inspect the sealing area of the shaft and replace if needed. This completes the hydraulic motor teardown video. Today's topic: the hydraulic motor rebuild of a Hypro ForceField pump. The tools and materials required to reassemble this motor will include a pair of small snap ring pliers, some light oil, an arbor press, an 1¼ pipe, at least 4 inches long, a pair of large snap ring pliers, a 2.5 mm Allen wrench, 300 to 600 grit emery cloth, some alcohol wipes, a vise, a flat screwdriver, a 6 mm Allen wrench, a seal repair kit, and a crescent wrench. The first step is to reinstall the small retaining ring back into the retaining ring groove on the shaft. Go from the backside of the shaft to avoid scratching the sealing area. It is important to make sure that the retaining ring is fully locked in. Now, use the end plate to hold the shaft in place while you reinstall the thrust bearing assembly. The proper order is thrust washer, thrust bearing, thrust washer, and then the new seal. For the new seal, make sure you put it on with the open end facing down. Be careful not to roll the lip of that seal over. If that does happen, discard and use a new seal. Now we can press the seal back into the motor body. First, oil the outer surface of the seal by hand. With the threads facing up, align the thrust bearing, and place it into the motor body. Install the spacer, with the grooves facing down. Use the 1¼ pipe to press the spacer down until you feel it bottom out. Then slip the bearing over the shaft, and use the pipe to press it all the way down evenly. Reinstall the large retaining ring, and make sure it's fully seated into the groove. You may want to use your 1¼ pipe again, and press down until you hear it click. Next, turn the assembly over and use the arbor press to gently press directly on the shaft. This will allow the retaining ring to touch the thrust washer inside of the motor. Don't apply too much pressure, just a very gentle press will do. At this point, rotate the shaft. It should turn freely by hand. If it does not, press the shaft back out and inspect all components for any damage or debris. Next, carefully guide the tone wheel over the shaft, being careful not to scratch the surface. bottom and out on the bearing, and retighten the set screws. Inspect the shaft for any linear scratches, and polish with 300 to 600 grit emery cloth. Make sure to hold the emery cloth in a fixed position to avoid creating any new linear scratches along the shaft. Clean with alcohol after polishing. Now, let's go back to the vise. Install the new O-ring from the repair kit into the groove in the body. Place the key into the keyway. Hold that in place with a straight screwdriver. Install the inner portion of the G-rotor. If this is aligned, it should slip on without any force. Then, install the outer portion of the G-rotor. Make sure all of these parts are very clean. It is important to maintain very tight tolerances inside of this motor. Next, put on the G-rotor housing. Line up the large and small locating pins. Be aware, the G-rotor and this housing are the same on both sides, so they can be installed in either direction. Apply a small amount of oil to the G-rotor to keep it from running dry at startup. Now, on the end plate, apply a small amount of oil in the O-ring groove and reinstall the O-ring. Using the oil will help hold the O-ring in place during assembly. With the O-ring installed, line up the locating pins of the end plate and install. Next, reinstall the bolts and tighten them down in a crisscross pattern to 17 foot-pounds. After torquing all 4 bolts, rotate the shaft by hand, and it should turn freely. If it doesn't, remove the end plate and inspect the inside of the motor for debris or dirt that may have gotten in during reassembly. In the hydraulic seal repair kit, a new thread seal gasket for the bypass screw is included. Replace this by threading it onto the bypass screw, being careful not to damage the gasket, and leaving about 4 threads showing. For close center hydraulic systems, tighten the bypass screw fully into the motor. For open center hydraulic systems, tighten the bypass screw, and then back it out about a turn and a half. This will be adjusted after fully reassembling the pump. Please refer to your owner's manual for proper adjustment. With the bypass screw properly tightened for either an open or closed center hydraulic system, reinstall the washer and tighten down the jam nut. Finally, reinstall the adapter port. Today's topic: rebuilding the wet end of a Hypro ForceField pump. The tools and materials required to rebuild the wet end of this pump include some distilled water, a 17mm socket, some alcohol, a seal installation tool, a pair of spring clamps, a 5mm Allen socket, a crescent wrench, and some medium-strength thread lock. First, support the mounting flange face down, at least 2 inches above the work surface, being careful not to damage the O-ring groove. Guide the motor shaft evenly into the flange, being careful not to scratch the shaft. Use the 17mm socket to tighten down the 4 mounting bolts. Now, let's reassemble the mechanical seals. First, lubricate the outer surface of the first seal seat with distilled water. Do not use oil as a lubricant. Install this seal with the gasket facing down into the pump and the shiny side of the seal facing up. Use a clean seal tool to press the gasket down into the flange. Make sure to clean the seal face with alcohol to make sure it is free of any dirt or debris. Go ahead and clean the motor shaft with alcohol as well. Next, lubricate the inner surface of one of the mechanical seals with distilled water. It's important not to use oil for this, as the seal must grip the shaft and rotate with it. Making sure the surface is clean. Install the mechanical seal with the shiny side facing down. Use the open end of the seal tool to push the seal down until it makes contact with the seat. Next, install the spring. Once the spring is installed, lubricate the second mechanical seal with distilled water. This seal will be installed with the shiny side facing out. Use the seal tool and push it down onto the shaft. Next, we'll install the other seal seat by lubricating the gasket with distilled water. Make sure the gasket is facing in and the shiny side is facing out towards the seal port. Push this in by hand. Clean the seal faces with alcohol one last time. Now you can install a new O-ring into the flange, making sure that's fully seated. Then install a new membrane, making sure the ribbed side is facing out and the smooth side is facing in. Make sure the inner and outer portion of the membrane are fully seated. With the membrane seated, carefully slide the seal plate over the shaft, with the seal seat facing the pump. Using the spring clamps to hold the seal plate in place, use the 5 mm Allen socket to reinstall the 6 Allen screws. Torque these in a star-shaped pattern to 48 inch-pounds. It is a good idea to re-torque these screws at least 3 or 4 times in a star-shaped pattern to ensure the membrane is fully compressed and all 6 screws are equally torqued. Next, fill the chamber with wet seal fluid. The amount required is typically about 10.5 ounces or 310 milliliters. For the ForceField seal to function properly, the chamber must be completely full and airtight. It is critical to use only the correct seal chamber fluid, noted in the owner's manual. Once completely filled, use the crescent wrench to tighten the fill port plug. Now is a good time to wipe off any excess fluid and check around the plate for any possible leaks. With the chamber filled, we can remove the spring clamps and install a new O-ring by stretching the O-ring over the seal plate. Be careful not to twist it, which could create a leak path. With this installed, lubricate the O-ring with grease or water as we prepare to install the casing. Next, reinstall the impeller. It is a good practice to turn the keyway facing up, so the key will not fall out. With the key in the keyway, line up the impeller and slide it on. Apply a medium-strength thread lock to the acorn nut, and use the 17 mm socket to tighten it back down. Now we can reinstall the casing. Use the 17 mm socket to tighten down the 4 mounting bolts. If it has not already been installed, reinstall the adapter port into the motor. Now, this pump is ready to be reinstalled back onto the sprayer. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.